Kreia, also known as Darth Kreia, was one of the most philosophically complex figures in the Star Wars universe. Her ultimate aim, to destroy the Force itself, represented a radical departure from the endless dichotomy of light versus dark that defined the galaxy's history. If Kreia had succeeded in this monumental endeavor, the galaxy would have been fundamentally reshaped, its cultures, conflicts, and very existence taking on a wholly new dimension. The Force, as a binding, mystical energy field, has been a pervasive influence throughout the galaxy. It connects all living things, granting power to Jedi and Sith alike, and influencing events through what some have called the will of the Force. Kreia viewed this as a malign influence, a manipulative force that robbed beings of their agency and perpetuated an endless cycle of conflict. By her reckoning, destroying the Force would free the galaxy from its invisible shackles, allowing individuals to shape their destinies without its interference. But what would this liberation truly look like? In a galaxy devoid of the Force, the immediate consequences would be seismic. The Jedi and Sith orders, whose entire existences revolve around their connection to the Force, would be rendered impotent. Lightsabers, reliant on the Force-sensitive crystals attuned to their wielders, might cease to function. The once mystical prowess of these orders, the telekinesis, mind tricks, and precognitive abilities that made them revered and feared, would vanish overnight. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant, a bastion of light side philosophy, would likely crumble into irrelevance as its adherents struggled to find purpose in a world stripped of the Force's guidance. For the Sith, the loss would be equally devastating. Their relentless pursuit of power and domination, driven by their exploitation of the dark side, would falter. The Sith's hierarchy, built on strength and the ruthless application of their abilities, would collapse under its own weight. Without the Force, their once formidable might would be reduced to mundane politicking and mundane weaponry, perhaps no different than the scheming of non-Force users. Yet the impact of Kreia's success would ripple far beyond these two factions. Entire civilizations and cultural practices centered on the Force would be thrown into disarray. Planets like Dathomir, home to the Night Sisters who rely on the Force to wield their magics, would face an existential crisis. Religious sects and spiritual traditions, some of which see the Force as a deity or sacred energy, would be forced to confront the sudden absence of their guiding principle. For some, this might result in despair. For others, an opportunity to reinterpret their beliefs in new, less mystical frameworks. The galaxy's balance of power would shift drastically. Without Jedi and Sith to intervene in galactic affairs, secular powers such as the Galactic Republic, the Trade Federation, or the Mandalorians might rise to fill the void. These factions, unrestrained by the interventions of Force users, could chart new courses of action unfettered by the moral dichotomies imposed by Jedi pacifism or Sith aggression. Wars and alliances would be determined by political pragmatism, economic interests, or ideological clashes rather than the manipulations of a cosmic force. However, the absence of the Force would not guarantee peace or prosperity. The conflicts that racked the galaxy for millennia were not solely the result of the Force's influence. Greed, ambition, and the thirst for power are intrinsic to many sentient species. In the vacuum left by the Force, new systems of dominance and oppression would likely emerge. The same technological and industrial capabilities that fueled countless wars would remain intact, and the absence of Force-sensitive guardians might even embolden tyrants or warlords to expand their reigns unchecked. Yet there would also be room for remarkable transformation. Freed from the seemingly preordained outcomes dictated by the Force, individuals and societies might develop in unprecedented ways. People previously overshadowed by the larger-than-life presences of Jedi or Sith could rise to prominence based on merit, ingenuity, or sheer determination. This might usher in a golden age of scientific and technological advancement as beings sought new ways to address challenges once mitigated by the Force. Diseases cured by the Force's healing techniques would demand scientific solutions, and innovations in transportation, communication, and governance could take center stage in shaping the galaxy's future. Still, Kreia's victory might not have eradicated the Force completely. It's possible that her destruction of the Force would have only severed its conscious connection to sentient life, rendering it dormant rather than annihilated. This could lead to fascinating consequences as the galaxy adapted to a world where remnants of the Force lingered as echoes or latent energy. Over generations, sentience might rediscover aspects of the Force, reawakening old debates about its role in life and society. The psychological and philosophical ramifications would be profound. For many, the Force was not just a source of power, but a fundamental aspect of their identity and worldview. To suddenly lose this connection would be akin to losing a sense or dimension of existence. This might drive some to madness or despair, while others would see it as an opportunity for growth and reinvention. For non-Force users, the sudden leveling of the playing field might inspire a sense of equality, but it could also provoke resentment or opportunism as new power dynamics emerged. In the grander scheme, Kreia's success would invite reflection on the nature of freedom and determinism. By removing the Force, Kreia sought to grant true autonomy to the galaxy's inhabitants, yet her actions would also impose a new kind of order, a universe where beings were constrained not by the Force's will but by their own ingenuity and limitations. This paradox underscores the enduring complexity of her philosophy, as well as the unpredictable consequences of such a radical endeavor. As the galaxy continued to grapple with the absence of the Force, new patterns of civilization would inevitably emerge. Without the unifying, yet polarizing, presence of Jedi and Sith, galactic societies would need to redefine their institutions, governments, and cultural practices. The political landscape might shift toward more democratic or decentralized systems, as no single faction would have the overwhelming power that Force users once wielded. However, it could just as easily lean into authoritarianism, with opportunistic leaders exploiting the power vacuum left behind. On planets like Coruscant, once the epicenter of Jedi governance and philosophical training, the transformation would be particularly stark. The iconic Jedi Temple might be repurposed into a historical museum, or entirely abandoned as a relic of a bygone era. The Galactic Senate, freed from the periodic interventions of Jedi diplomacy, might find itself floundering without their stabilizing influence, or it might thrive in a new era of self-determined governance. The absence of the Force would strip away the mystique that had often surrounded political struggles, forcing senators and rulers to rely on their wits, alliances, and technology to maintain control and resolve conflicts. In more remote regions of the galaxy, the loss of the Force would hit even harder. On worlds like Tython or Ilum, where the Force was more than a mystical concept and instead a tangible part of daily life, societies might collapse entirely. Ilum's Kyber crystal caves, once the source of Jedi lightsabers, would become inert geological curiosities. Force-sensitive species, such as the Miraluka, who rely on the Force for sight, would face catastrophic consequences as their biological connection to the Force vanished. Such species might adapt over generations, but the interim would be marked by profound loss and uncertainty. The galactic economy would also undergo significant upheaval. Industries that catered to the Jedi and Sith, whether through the production of lightsabers, the construction of temples, or the training of Force-sensitive individuals, would vanish, leaving millions without purpose or employment. Smugglers and bounty hunters who thrived in the chaotic fringe zones where Jedi seldom tread would find their work significantly altered. While their lives might initially become easier without Jedi interference, they would also lose the balance and order that the Force sometimes provided, potentially leading to greater lawlessness and instability. Technological innovation, however, could surge in the wake of the Force's disappearance. The reliance on Force-based solutions to problems often stifled scientific advancement in certain areas, as the mystical was favored over the practical. With the Force no longer available, beings across the galaxy might develop new technologies to replace what was lost. Advanced prosthetics could substitute for Force-based healing, and new weapon systems might rival the elegance and efficiency of lightsabers. Entire fields of study, cybernetics, genetics, and artificial intelligence, could see unprecedented growth as the galaxy sought to fill the void left by the Force. Culturally, the galaxy would enter a period of profound introspection. Art, literature, and philosophy, which had often been shaped by the duality of light and dark, would shift toward exploring themes of individuality, choice, and the limits of human potential. New religions might arise to fill the spiritual void left by the Force's absence, and some might reinterpret the Force itself as a historical myth rather than a tangible reality. However, remnants of Force traditions would undoubtedly persist, even in radically altered forms. For instance, some former Jedi might become philosophers or teachers, preserving their knowledge of the Force as a cultural memory rather than a practical discipline. The notion of destiny, so often tied to the will of the Force, would be called into question. Without a cosmic energy guiding events, individuals would need to confront the stark reality of their choices and the randomness of existence. This could lead to a renaissance of existential philosophy, with beings exploring what it means to be truly free. The weight of responsibility would shift entirely onto individuals and societies, fostering a greater sense of autonomy, but also potentially overwhelming them with the enormity of their own agency. But would Kreia's act truly liberate the galaxy, or would it simply impose a different form of tyranny? In removing the Force, Kreia sought to end its influence over life and destiny, yet her success would not guarantee a utopia. Conflict, greed, and ambition are intrinsic aspects of sentient beings, and the absence of the Force might only magnify these traits. Without Jedi to mediate disputes or Sith to embody destructive ambition, new forms of conflict might emerge, ones shaped by technology, ideology, or sheer power struggles. The Force's absence might also lead to unforeseen consequences for the natural world. The Force was deeply intertwined with life itself, influencing ecosystems and sustaining the balance of nature. Its destruction could disrupt the harmony of certain worlds, leading to ecological collapses or unexpected mutations. Planets like Dagobah, whose rich biodiversity was closely tied to the Force, might become barren or inhospitable. Conversely, new ecosystems might arise in the vacuum left by the Force, their evolution shaped entirely by natural processes rather than mystical guidance. Ultimately, the galaxy would adapt, as it always has, to this monumental change. Some might see Kreia's actions as an act of salvation, freeing the galaxy from millennia of manipulation and conflict. Others might view it as an act of hubris, a crime against nature that robbed the galaxy of its soul. The debate over her legacy would likely endure for generations, with historians, philosophers, and ordinary beings grappling with the implications of a galaxy without the Force. What is certain is that Kreia's success would mark the end of an era. The Force, for all its flaws and mysteries, had been a constant presence throughout the galaxy's history. Its removal would herald a new age, one defined not by the struggle between light and dark, but by the capacity of sentient beings to shape their destinies without the aid of an omnipresent power. Whether this age would bring about enlightenment or chaos, unity or division, would depend entirely on the choices of those left behind in the wake of Kreia's radical vision.